Welcome to TonightTales Audio, where quiet moments become unforgettable stories. Sit back, relax, and let tonight's tale begin. Love, a cup of coffee later. Rain had settled over the city again. Drops tapped softly against the window, blurring the world outside. She sat at her usual table in the cafe. The cup in front of her was still warm, but she had not taken a single sip. She was waiting, not for anything specific, not really, and yet. The doorbell rang. She looked up. He stepped inside, shook the rain from his hair, and glanced around. As if he were searching for something or someone. Their eyes met, just for a moment, but long enough for something to change. He smiled carefully. Not wide, not confident, just honest. She felt her heart beat a little faster, as if her body already understood something her thoughts had not yet caught up with. He took a few steps toward the counter. Then, after a brief hesitation, he turned back toward her. "Is this seat taken?" he asked, pointing to the chair across from her. She looked at him, at the chair, then back at him, and smiled. Sometimes love does not begin with grand words, not with promises, not with plans. The rain did not stop that afternoon. It settled over the city like a quiet promise, steady and patient, tapping softly against the cafe windows. People came and went, shaking umbrellas, brushing drops from their coats, leaving small trails of water on the floor. But he stayed. He wrapped his hands around the warm cup in front of him, as if the heat might anchor him there. Steam rose slowly between them, curling into the air and disappearing before reaching the ceiling. She finally took her first sip of coffee. It had grown a little cooler now, but the taste was still comforting. Familiar.
So,
He said gently, glancing toward the window.
does it always rain like this here?
She followed his gaze.
Not always,
She answered.
but often enough that people stop being surprised.
He smiled at that. A quiet smile, the kind that stayed for a moment longer than expected. They sat in silence again, not uncomfortable, not forced, just two strangers sharing the same small corner of the afternoon. Outside, a bus passed slowly through the wet street, its tires whispering against the pavement. A cyclist hurried by, shoulders hunched against the rain. She noticed how he watched everything carefully, not nervously, not impatiently, curiously, as if he were learning the rhythm of the city.
Are you new here? She asked.
He nodded once.
Just moved last week.
A pause.
Still figuring out where everything is.
He added with a soft laugh.
Especially the good coffee.
That made her smile.
Well,
She said, lifting her cup slightly.
you found the right place.
Their eyes met again. This time, the moment lasted a little longer. Not long enough to feel bold, but long enough to feel familiar. The rain continued to fall, and neither of them seemed in a hurry to leave. He returned the next day. Not at the same time, not with the same careful hesitation. But he came. She noticed him before the bell above the door had fully settled from its soft chime. A small shift in the air. A familiar movement. He stepped inside, brushing rain from his jacket, though the sky that morning had only offered a light drizzle. Nothing like the steady rain from the day before. Still, he carried the same quiet presence with him. He glanced around the cafe just as he had done before, not searching nervously, not uncertain, simply looking, and then he saw her. Their eyes met again, and something in his expression softened, as if recognizing a place he had already begun to trust. She felt it too. That small flicker of recognition, not excitement, not yet, just comfort. He walked toward the counter, ordered his coffee, and waited. The barista greeted him with a friendly nod, already remembering his choice.
Black coffee.
She said with a smile.
Still no sugar?
He laughed quietly.
Still no sugar.
Cup in hand, he hesitated for a brief moment, then turned toward her. He did not ask if the seat was taken this time. He simply paused beside the table, offering a small, polite smile.
Good morning.
He said. Her lips curved before she could stop them.
Good morning.
The words felt natural, easy, as if they had been speaking to each other for much longer than a single afternoon. He sat down across from her again, carefully placing his cup on the table. Steam rose between them, carrying the rich scent of fresh coffee. Outside, the city had begun to wake. Cars moved slowly along the street. People hurried past the window, coats pulled tight, phones pressed to their ears. A delivery truck stopped near the corner, its engine rumbling softly. Inside, the cafe remained warm and steady. Comfortable. She glanced at the clock on the wall without thinking. 9:15. Yesterday, he had arrived closer to noon. Today, earlier. She noticed the change before she understood what it meant. He wrapped his hands around the cup, letting the warmth settle into his fingers.
I was hoping you'd be here.
He said after a moment. The words were simple, but they carried more weight than he probably intended. Her heart skipped, just once, a quiet, unexpected beat. She lowered her gaze to her coffee, watching the surface ripple slightly as she set the cup back on the table.
I come here most mornings.
She answered. Another pause. Not awkward, not heavy, just filled with the gentle rhythm of the cafe around them, the sound of spoons against porcelain, the low murmur of conversations, the steady hiss of the espresso machine. He nodded slowly as if storing that information somewhere safe.
Then I suppose I chose the right place to start my day.
He said softly. She met his eyes again, and this time she did not look away immediately, because something had already begun to change. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, like the first drop of rain before the storm truly begins. The rain stopped the next morning. It simply ended as if the sky had decided it had done enough. Sunlight slipped through the cafe windows, warm and unexpected, stretching across the wooden floor and climbing slowly up the walls. The city outside looked different now, brighter, lighter. She noticed it the moment she stepped inside. The air felt clearer, the room quieter in a new way, filled with the soft hum of morning instead of the steady rhythm of falling rain. She walked to her usual table and set down her bag, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. For a moment, she stood still, letting the sunlight touch her face. It felt good. She sat down and wrapped her hands around the warm cup. Steam rose gently, catching the light. The bell above the door rang. She looked up immediately, faster than she meant to. He stepped inside, blinking slightly as the sunlight reached him. There were no drops of rain on his jacket today, no damp hair, no umbrella in his hand, just a quiet smile. Their eyes met. And this time, the recognition came instantly, without searching, without hesitation. He walked toward the counter, ordered his coffee, and turned toward her again. Almost automatically now. She felt herself smile before he even moved. He carried his cup carefully across the room and stopped beside her table.
Looks like we finally got a break from the rain,
He said. His voice sounded lighter today, touched by the same warmth that filled the room. She glanced toward the window, where sunlight reflected off the wet pavement outside.
For now. It never stays gone for long.
She answered softly. He chuckled.
I'll take what I can get.
He hesitated for only a second before gesturing toward the chair across from her.
Mind if I join you?
She nodded her head gently.
Of course.
He sat down, leaning back slightly in the chair, letting out a slow breath, the kind that came when someone allowed themselves to relax. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They simply sat there, sharing the quiet warmth of the morning. Outside, people walked more slowly than usual, faces turned toward the sun as if rediscovering something they had almost forgotten. A child ran past the window, laughing, pulling a bright red balloon behind him. She watched the scene, then glanced back at him.
You said you just moved here.
She began.
Do you like it so far?
He considered the question, eyes drifting toward the window.
I do.
He said finally.
It's quieter than where I came from.
A pause.
And friendlier.
He added, meeting her gaze again. Something in his tone made her look at him more closely. Not curiosity alone, something warmer.
What brought you here?
She asked. He turned his cup slowly in his hands, watching the steam rise and fade.
Work. A new start, I suppose.
He said. She felt it, that small weight beneath the surface. Yet she did not push further. Not yet. Instead, she lifted her cup and took a slow sip. The coffee tasted richer today. Warmer, or maybe it was simply the sunlight. He followed her movement, then smiled, a little more openly this time. He looked slightly surprised at himself. She felt her heart respond, a soft, steady rhythm, and for the first time, she allowed the silence between them to linger. Not as strangers, not as acquaintances, but as two people who had begun, without realizing it, to look forward to the same moment each day. Outside, the sunlight grew stronger, and inside the cafe, something gentle and new continued to unfold. The rain returned during the night. She heard it before she opened her eyes. The familiar rhythm against the window, steady and patient, like a memory that refused to fade. For a moment, she lay still in bed, listening. The sound had become comforting lately. Predictable. She dressed slowly that morning, choosing her sweater without much thought, moving through her routine the way she always did. Nothing felt different. Not yet. Outside, the streets were wet again, shining under the gray sky. Cars moved carefully through shallow puddles, their tires sending soft ripples across the pavement. She stepped into the cafe and felt the warmth wrap around her shoulders. The smell of fresh coffee greeted her immediately. She walked to her usual table, set down her bag, and sat. She wrapped her hands around the cup and glanced toward the door. Just once, out of habit. The bell above the entrance rang as a customer stepped inside, shaking rain from an umbrella. Not him. She looked back down at her coffee. It was still early. Too early to think anything of it. She took a slow sip. Warm. Familiar. Time passed quietly. People came and went, coats dripping, voices low, footsteps soft against the floor. The rain outside continued its steady rhythm, tapping gently against the windows. She checked the clock without meaning to. 9:15, the same time he had arrived yesterday. Her eyes moved toward the door again. Nothing. She told herself it did not matter. Of course it did not matter. They were strangers, after all. Two people who happened to share the same table for a few mornings. That was all. She lifted her cup again, but this time the coffee tasted different. Not bad, just empty. Another customer entered. The bell rang once more. Her gaze lifted automatically. Not him. She felt something shift inside her. Small, quiet, almost invisible. A tiny disappointment she had not expected. She looked out the window, watching raindrops slide slowly down the glass. Maybe he was busy. Maybe he had overslept. Maybe he had found another cafe. The thought lingered longer than it should have. She stayed longer than she normally would. She told herself she was simply finishing her coffee. Nothing more. The cool air touched her face, and she pulled the collar closer around her neck. The city looked exactly as it always had. Busy, gray, unchanged. But as she began to walk down the street, she felt a quiet realization settle inside her. She had started to expect him, and now without meaning to, she missed him. The rain had softened by the next morning. No longer a steady curtain, just a light drizzle, the kind that hovered in the air rather than truly falling. She noticed it as she walked toward the cafe, her steps slower than usual. She had almost decided not to come. Almost, but habit, and something else she did not want to name, had brought her there anyway. The bell above the door rang softly as she stepped inside. Warmth greeted her immediately. The familiar smell of coffee, the quiet murmur of voices. Everything looked the same. Her table was empty. She removed her coat, sat down, and wrapped her hands around the cup the barista placed in front of her. Steam rose gently. She told herself she would not look at the door. Not right away. She focused on the surface of her coffee, watching the small ripples settle. One breath, then another. The bell rang. Her eyes lifted before she could stop them. He stood in the doorway. For a moment, he did not move. Water clung to the shoulders of his jacket, tiny droplets catching the light. His hair was damp again, pushed back carelessly with one hand. He looked tired. When he saw her, something in his expression shifted. Relief, quiet and immediate. Their eyes met, and the small knot inside her chest loosened before she even realized it had been there. He stepped inside, shaking the rain from his coat, then walked toward the counter. She watched him order, watched the way he rubbed the back of his neck absent-mindedly as if carrying the weight of a long night. Cup in hand, he turned. For a brief moment, he hesitated, as though unsure whether he was still welcome at her table. She met his gaze and offered a small, gentle smile. The hesitation disappeared. He walked toward her.
Good morning.
He said softly.
Good morning?
she answered. Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. He sat down carefully, placing his cup on the table. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The silence was not uncomfortable, just full of things waiting to be said.
I'm sorry about yesterday.
He began. The words came quietly, without excuse or drama.
I meant to come.
She listened, her hands resting lightly around her cup. He looked down at the table, gathering his thoughts.
My sister called late the night before.
He continued.
Her little boy had a fever.
A pause.
I stayed with them until morning.
He glanced up again, meeting her eyes.
He's fine now.
He added quickly. Relief softened his features as he said the words. She felt her shoulders relax.
I'm glad he's okay.
She said, and she meant it. He nodded once, grateful. Another small silence settled between them, lighter now. The tension that had lingered in the air the day before slowly faded, replaced by something warmer, something steadier. She took a sip of her coffee. This time, the taste felt right again.
Did you miss the cafe?
She asked lightly, a hint of playfulness in her voice. He smiled, the kind of smile that reached his eyes.
More than I expected.
Her heart responded to the honesty in his tone. But with quiet recognition. Outside, the drizzle continued to fall, soft and steady against the windows. Inside, the cafe felt warmer than usual. He wrapped his hands around his cup, letting the warmth settle into his fingers.
I didn't realize how quickly a place can start to feel like part of your routine.
He said slowly. He looked at her as he spoke. And this time, she did not pretend not to understand what he meant. Because she had felt it too. That small shift, that gentle pull. The beginning of something that had not yet found its name. Welcome to TonightTales Audio, where quiet moments become unforgettable stories. Sit back, relax, and let tonight's tale begin.